Jr. On October 14th, 1942, the 23-year-old Woodard enlisted in the United States Army at Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. He served in the Pacific Theater in a labor battalion as a longshoreman and was promoted to sergeant. He earned a battle star for his Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal by unloading ships under enemy fire in New Guinea, and received the Good Conduct Medal as well. Oh, am I? Yeah, I am. As well as the Service Medal in World War II and World War II Victory Medal awarded to all American participants. He received an honorable discharge. On February 12, 1946, Woodard was on a Greyhound Lines bus traveling from Camp Gordon in Augusta, Georgia, where he had been discharged, en route to rejoin his family in North Carolina. When the bus reached a rest stop just outside Augusta, Woodard asked the bus driver if there was time for him to use the restroom. The driver grudgingly acceded to the request after an argument. Woodard returned to his seat from the rest stop without incident, and the bus departed. The bus stopped in Batesburg, near Aiken. Though Woodard had caused no disruption other than the earlier argument, the driver contacted the local police, including Chief Linwood Schul, who forcibly removed Woodard from the bus. After demanding to see his discharge papers, a number of Batesburg policemen, including Schul, took Woodard to a nearby alley where they beat him repeatedly with nightsticks. They then took Woodard to the town jail and arrested him for disorderly conduct, accusing him of drinking beer in the back of the bus with other soldiers. Newspaper accounts vary on what happened next, but author and attorney Michael Gardner said in 2003, quote, "In none of the papers is there any suggestion that there was verbal or physical violence on the part of Sergeant Woodard. It's quite unclear what really happened. What did happen with certainty is the next morning when the sun came up, Sergeant Isaac Woodard was blind for life." During the course of the night in jail, Schul beat and blinded Woodard, who later stated in court that he was beaten for saying yes instead of yes, sir. He also had partial amnesia as a result of his injuries. Woodard further testified that he was punched in the eyes by police several times on the way to the jail, and later repeatedly jabbed in his eyes with a billy club. Newspaper accounts indicate that Woodard's eyes had been gouged out. Historical documents indicate that each globe was ruptured irreparably in the socket. The following morning, the Batesburg police sent Woodard before the local judge, who found him guilty and fined him $50. The soldier requested medical assistance, but it took 2 more days for a doctor to be sent to him. Not knowing where he was and still experiencing amnesia, Woodard ended up in a hospital in Aiken receiving substandard medical care. 3 weeks after he was reported missing by his relatives, Woodard was discovered in the hospital. He was immediately rushed to an army hospital in Spartanburg. Though his memory had begun to recover by that time, doctors found both eyes were damaged beyond repair. Although the case was not widely reported at first, it was soon extensively covered in major national newspapers. The NAACP worked to publicize Woodard's plight and also lobbied the state government of South Carolina to address the incident, which it dismissed. On his ABC radio show, Orson Welles Commentaries, actor and filmmaker Orson Welles crusaded for the punishment of Schul and his accomplices. On the broadcast, which was made on July 28, 1946, Welles read an affidavit which was sent to him by the NAACP and signed by Woodard. He criticized the lack of action by the South Carolina government as intolerable and shameful. Woodard was the focus of Welles's 4 subsequent broadcasts. The NAACP felt that these broadcasts did more than anything else to prompt the Justice Department to act on the case. On September 19, 1946, 7 months after the incident, NAACP Executive Secretary Walter Francis White met with President Harry S. Truman in the Oval Office to discuss the Woodard case. Gardner writes that when Truman heard this story in the context of the state authorities of South Carolina doing nothing for 7 months, he exploded. The following day, Truman wrote a letter to Attorney General Tom C. Clark demanding that action be taken to address South Carolina's reluctance to try the case. 6 days later, on September 26th, Truman directed the Justice Department to open an investigation. A short investigation followed, and on October 2nd, Schul and several of his officers were indicted in U.S. District Court in Columbia. It was within federal jurisdiction because the beating had occurred at a bus stop on federal property, and at the time, Woodard was in uniform of the armed services. The case was presided over by Judge Julius Wades Waring. By all accounts, the trial was a travesty. The local U.S. attorney charged with handling the case failed to interview anyone except the bus driver, a decision that Waring, a civil rights proponent, believed was a gross dereliction of duty. Waring later wrote of being disgusted at the way the case was handled at the local level, commenting, "I was shocked by the hypocrisy of my government in submitting that disgraceful case." The defense did not perform better. When the defense attorney began to shout racial epithets at Woodard, Waring stopped him immediately. During the trial, the defense attorney stated to the all-white jury that, quote, "If you rule against Schul, then let this South Carolina secede again." After Woodard gave his account of the events, Schul firmly denied it. He claimed that Woodard had threatened him with a gun and that Schul had used his nightclub in self-defense. During this testimony, Schul admitted that he repeatedly struck Woodard in the eyes. On November 5th, after 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Schul not guilty on all charges, despite his admission that he had blinded Woodard. The courtroom broke into applause upon hearing the verdict. The failure to convict Schul was perceived as a political failure by the Truman administration. Schul was never punished, dying in Batesburg on December 27, 1997, at the age of 95. Woodard moved north after the trial during the Second Great Migration and lived in the New York City area for the rest of his life. He died at age 73 in the VA hospital in the Bronx on September 23, 1992. He was buried with military honors at the Calverton National Cemetery in Calverton, New York. Woodard's drunk and disorderly conviction was vacated in 2018. A group led by Don North, a retired Army major from Carrollton, Georgia, received permission to erect a historical marker in honor of Woodard in Batesville, Leesville, in South Carolina. In 2019, the marker was unveiled. The bottom part of the marker was written in Braille. Can we please kneel for Isaac Woodard?